Welcome to the Peace, Power, and Purpose podcast, where brotherhood, faith, and resilience collide. Here, real men share raw testimonies of battles seen and unseen, stories of struggle, redemption, and the strength found only in Christ. This is more than a podcast. Welcome back to the Peace, Power, and Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Steve, and today I am joined by Justin, who is the host of the Carter Mentality podcast. Justin is a full-time firefighter, and he's an advocate for men's mental health. Justin, thank you very much for coming on the show today, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, man. Well, let's kind of start from the beginning. What'd your childhood look like? Like, where were you born? And let's kind of go through your school period, school age, and then kind of where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't really have a massively terrible childhood, is what I like to tell people. I didn't have the parents that never loved me or anything like that. I only had one father that never loved me. Um,
Okay.
so growing up, my mom was pregnant with me. She lived in New York, ended up coming down to Wilmington, North Carolina, and then eventually shifting over to South Carolina. Had me. She met my father, which is actually my stepfather, but I only consider him my father,
Okay.
because he was the only one that was ever there. So she met him when I was like one, and born and raised in the beach in Myrtle Beach,
Nice.
South Carolina.
Okay.
Um, so big beach kid. Went from there. So my father was was in the military and then ended up transitioning to be a fireman. So throughout my entire childhood, that was pretty much what I always saw, which kind of ended up eventually leading me into going into the fire department.
Nice.
Um, but growing up, man, yeah, I grew up like any just like regular middle class working child, dude. Had a beautiful, beautiful house, friends, always played outside, just enjoyed it, enjoyed the beach, enjoyed everything we had, right?
Yeah.
Um, so in the interminglings of all that as a kid, from what I can truly remember well enough, my biological father would try and make appearances,
Okay.
would try to be in the picture and was just never there, like never good. I spent a weekend with him and then like the following weekend, he ended up getting busted with some pot that he's growing in his house. So he went to jail for a little bit for that. Um, from what my mom told me, like, because I was obviously a baby, he committed armed robbery.
Mm.
He lived above a bar, and above the bar, like when he would get his paycheck, he'd go in there and just gamble and drink.
Okay.
Um, and then one day he came home like had no money, and my mom was like, "What the hell, dude? Like, where's the money?" And he was just like, "Oh, I'm sorry." So he went down, and this is how I'm gathering the story. Went down and robbed it to try and get the money back.
Wow.
Um, Yeah, so he was like on and off drugs. Never anything hardcore from what I know, but was just on and off like just drugs with just doing stupid stuff.
Okay.
When I was a baby, he fell out of the fifth or sixth story of a apartment complex he was doing construction on
Wow.
and broke some serious bones in his body. So he was laid up for a while with that. My mom took care of him. And when my mom was asking him about marriage, he just my biological father had no interest in marriage, so that's when my mom ended up breaking off of him and going on about her life, and that's when she met my father.
Okay.
And so they rolled from there. So for the most part, my childhood is just pretty normal, other than the fact of just him trying to make appearances. I think I'm pretty sure it was like 10 or 11. I finally told him I just didn't want anything to do with him. I didn't love him. He wasn't my father. I had a father. I had somebody that was always there for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was pretty much the last time I ever saw him. The next time I ever heard about him was 13 years later, which eventually led to 2 years. Yeah, 2 years ago. My father came by the firehouse and was like, "Hey man, I got to talk to you about something." I figured it was probably something I did at work. Probably hurt somebody's feelings because I'm just a very blunt guy. And he told me that he was dead, and I was just like, "Wow." And from there, like a lot of like unhealed trauma
Mhm.
really showed its face. Really showed its face. And I had, you know, as we go through the story, I'll talk a lot more about the stuff that I went through that played a role into it. But yeah, hopefully that answered your question
Yeah.
for the most part.
Yeah, and I was just curious, and, what about, like, growing up, were you going to a church at all as a family, or did you have a relationship with God, like, as you kinda grew up through, middle school, high school, and then on from that point what did that look like for you?
Yeah, so we were as a family, we were very active in
Okay,
church. Very, very active in church growing up. We went to an amazing church. It's called Christ United Methodist. It's no longer an organization. It ended up getting disbanded. Um, but yeah, I mean, I pretty much spent my entire childhood in
okay.
church. Was active in youth group. Ended up eventually afterwards when I graduated, went back as a youth group leader. Um, and always just always found connected and always found love and always found like a true passion for Christ there,
Mhm.
right? But I was also a kid, man, you know, so like I knew Jesus was an important thing in life, but you know, as you're a kid growing up, you're trying to find your identity, you're trying to find yourself,
Mhm.
you're still trying to make friends, you know, everybody claims that they don't care about fitting in, but to a level of extent, everyone cares about trying to fit in somewhere.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Um, so I never was the guy that was always like, "Hey, look at me, I love Jesus."
Yeah,
Um, I was always kind of like a Sunday a Sunday Jesus follower.
okay. What about when it came to,
Um,
like, career choices or big life decisions? Did you put God in those things, or did you kinda just say, "Justin's got this, this is where I wanna go, or this is a path I wanna take?"
yeah, dude, so, like, honestly, man, I didn't really put a lot of thought of Christ into it.
Mhm.
It was pretty much like, this is what I wanted to do. I either wanted to go to the military or I wanted to go to the fire department,
Mhm.
because my father did both, and, I really my father is a massive, massive role model for me. You know, they say that I don't know if this is the right words to use, but I always say I idolized my parents
Mhm.
growing up. My parents went through a lot of shit and really pulled themselves out of some low points and some gutters. Um, and I mean, they've been married for 25 years. And so I always had a good example of what love looked like, a good
Mhm.
example of what it looked like to truly be a husband, what it meant to be, you know, find a woman that looked like a mother and a wife.
Mhm.
Um, so when it was time to make my career choice, I saw my dad. My dad at that point was getting ready to round out his 17th or 16th year in the fire service.
Okay.
Um, so no, I'm sorry, it was more than that. I think it was like 18 or 19. So at that point, I was like, "This is what I'm gonna do.
Mhm.
Like this is what I knew. This is what I wanted to do." And graduated high school and turned around and you know a month and a half later, I was in the fire academy.
Oh, nice, okay. Very cool. Yeah, I was just curious because I like to ask guys, because I was that guy that didn't put God in any of my major life decisions in my, 20s and 30s, so I always like to kinda ask, especially first responder and, veterans that come on, ask them kinda where God was, in their life when they made the decision to pursue a
I
path
always
like that.
I always say God was there,
Yeah.
but I was the worst at acknowledging that God was there.
Gotcha. Okay.
Um, you know, I was always one of those kids that want or one of those guys that for so long wanted to have control of it myself, right?
Yeah, totally,
Um,
totally.
and so when I had control of it, I realized that the more decisions I made, they weren't bad decisions, right? Like I use the example, like, okay, so I just hit my 12th year on the job.
Okay.
And I tell people, like, when I talk to these new guys, I tell them, if you at 18 years old laid out my entire career in front of me
Mhm.
and you said, this is what you'll do, you know, I don't want to get too far into the story because we'll cover it, but just give a blanket. Like if you're gonna lose a finger, you're gonna pull people out of burning buildings, you're gonna get burnt, you're gonna be on some major complex operations, you're gonna be on a line of duty death fire, all this stuff, right? All of this stuff that I've been able to do in my career. If you told me at 18 years old this is what you were gonna do, I would have said, there's no way. There's zero chance. But if you would have said, this is everything you're gonna do because God's gonna put you in the position to do, I absolutely at that point in time not having the spiritual grounding that I do now, that I attribute a large majority of it to being what my wife has pulled out of me, I definitely probably would have turned off at that point
Mm.
because, um, right before I went to the fire academy, my mom lost her mother, which was my grandmother. She was one of my best friends. Like everything I did as a kid, I did with her.
Okay.
And it was like every other weekend I was up there and this, that, and everything. So that's when, you know, the loss starts, right? The
Mhm.
loss starts. I have no relationship with my biological father, so I'm broken from that. Um, my parents went through a hard patch in their marriage that almost led to a divorce. So there's that trauma, right? And now here I am at 18 years old, um, ready to go embark on my life and think mentally, I'm like, dude, I got it figured out, brother.
Mhm.
And then life decided to really just start slapping me right in the face. And I was like, wow, I don't have absolutely anything figured out. And I still, at that point in time, was just so blind that I couldn't see that God was like, hey, brother, right here,
Mhm.
come here, just come here.
Yeah. Do you
So I'm sorry, go
I
ahead.
was gonna say, do you think there was a part of you that wanted to prove to your biological dad that you were of value and worthy, so you chose a career path that maybe, other people wouldn't choose because there is that risk of harm and doing things that are more extraordinary than your average person that's gonna go and just do like an office job or something like that?
So I'll answer two parts of that question. Part one is probably for 8 years of my career, I carried a level of resentment of wanting to prove to this dude that basically, fuck you, I never needed you.
Yeah, yeah. That's understandable.
And I was so wrong. Like me and my mom is, dude, if I get really emotional when I talk about my mom, because she's just one of the strongest women I've ever met in my life. I was supposed to have an older brother and she lost the baby. She had a miscarriage and then she had me and I have a little brother. I have 5 siblings
Oh,
altogether.
wow.
Um, and when me and my mom talk about him, we've had some really deep conversations. And I told her, like, when I was probably 20, I just turned 21. I said to her, I said, Mom, I just feel like I have to like prove something every day.
Mhm.
I said, because I feel like he has to know that I never needed him. And she got like really emotional when I told her that because she was like, you don't have to prove anything to anybody.
Mm.
Um, and I never understood that. I never understood that I didn't have to prove myself that I was already enough because I had a relationship, one with God, but two, I had two parents that loved me unconditionally. That if I would have walked in and said, Mom, Dad, I want to go paint Picasso images across bridges in the United States for the rest of my life,
Mhm.
they would have been like, I don't know why you're going to do that, but we're going to support you.
Nice.
Um, my parents, like, they never, you know, growing up, my dad was always extremely hard on me, and it took me a long time to understand why he was hard on me. But now, as a husband myself, and now as a father to be in 3 months, there's so many times that I look back at my dad and I tell him, "Thank you,
Mhm.
like thank you for being as hard as you were on me. Because if you never did, I would, especially in today's society, I wouldn't like." You see what's coming out in today's society,
Mhm.
right? Like dudes are going into the women's bathroom to pee because they think it's acceptable.
Yeah.
And, that just like dumb crap in my household like that never flew. Um, to answer the second part of your question, I was always an adrenaline junkie, dude. I wrestled, did jujitsu, all of it. Like, just always addicted to adrenaline. And also, like I said before, I had the constant exposure, dude. I grew up in a firehouse.
Yeah, yeah.
I grew up going to a firehouse. I grew up going to firehouse dinners. I grew up, Saturday morning breakfast at a firehouse. Um, and I just always like idolized these giants in my eyes, um, in and out of the firehouses that I was as a kid. So, you know, when my dad would tell me a lot and share a lot about his military career and the awesome things that he got to do, and then eventually transitioning and seeing him in the first responder world as I grew older, and that was the large bulk of my life, right? Like
Mhm.
my dad being a fireman, and my mom actually, she spent just shy of 10 years on the job
Oh,
also.
wow.
So it's all I knew.
Yeah.
It's all I ever knew. And there was 1 month of my career that I stepped away from the fire department to try and do an office job because my mental health got pretty bad. I got really burnt out. And yeah, dude, that was what a waste of time. What a waste of time.
That's
Um,
different. It's a different world.
it's to the people that do that, my wife has an office job. She has a very awesome job. She's in the legal field, but she's in an office 8 to 5.
Mhm.
And I don't know how she does it because I'd rip my hair out, dude.
It's a little different than being a firefighter.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I was just curious because I get you grew up in the fire service and obviously as a kid and you see that my dad was active duty army, so I grew up on a military base. So I think we kind of idolize our dads and kind of look at, okay, I want to do that too. But I know for me, I wanted to be in the military, but I want to do a job completely different of his to prove my worth. So I was just kind of curious, since your biological dad stepped out, and I understand that resentment piece, if it was a way to kind of, like you said, an fu to him. I don't need you. I can prove myself. So I just wanted to hear your take on that.
I want to add something to that too, like you just said. Um, because I don't want to go past this without saying this also. There was a level of me too that was tied with that resentment issues that I had with my biological father. I'm about to say my full-time dad. with with my biological father, that I had the resentment that actually inevitably rolled over into my stepfather.
Okay.
Um and for probably the first half of my career, probably about 5 years of my career, I felt like I always had to prove myself to my father.
Yeah.
Like, I had to prove to him that I was a knowledgeable fireman. I had to prove to him that I knew what I was doing and this and the other thing, and one day, like, he came to me, and we got into, like, a really, really heated argument over he had the incident command on a real good fire that I was on. And I was one of the initial search companies, and it came in with a reported kid trapped on the back side in the back of the house.
Mm.
And basically the entire front side of the house was like really engulfed with fire. Um, so the guys that had the hand lines were trying to put the fire out, and me and my crew, we ended up getting in front of those guys and have to go search under like heavy heat and fire conditions. And we got into a really big argument about that because we got into a little bit of a sticky situation ourselves, where we got beat down pretty good by some fire. We got pretty much beat to the carpet. Um, and the kid wasn't in the house. Well,
Mm.
in the transition of communication, we didn't get relayed that the kid was never actually in the house. He was on the back side of the house.
Oh.
Um, so he was never in the house in the first place. The parents didn't know that because the mom and the family was just so like taken back that their house was engulfed in flames that they never went to the back side of the house because the kid was there because he was just scared.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and there was just like a massive miscommunication issue, and it led to a huge argument that me and my father got into. And about like just, you know, the large majority of the argument was about like, just stop trying to control everything, right?
Hmm.
And I told him, I was like, I feel like I got to prove myself. And it was like in that moment, my dad like took a step back and he like completely changed his tone, and he was like, "Did you have nothing to prove to me?"
Hmm.
He was like, "I don't care if you flipped burgers at McDonald's." He was like, "I'm proud of you because you're my son."
Nice.
And it was really emotional because like I said, I got 5 siblings. My dad had a previous marriage before my mother when he was in the military, like right when he got out of the military. That he had 2 boys, and then while he was overseas, he was in a relationship that had a son as well,
Okay.
and was actually going to marry her and try to bring her back to the States. But she didn't want to leave. They lived in Holland in the
Mm.
Netherlands, and she never wanted to leave. So um, I got a brother that lives in Holland,
Hmm.
and I have a brother that's in the Navy on a submarine somewhere, and I've got an older brother that lives up where I live at, um, right down the road from me. We're very tight, and then I have a little brother. So
Okay.
yeah,
It's a
I just
lot.
never felt like yeah, well, I was in like that weird like middle point, right? I was
Yeah.
technically the middle kid, you
Right.
know, and
Right.
I always just felt like I was like, well, I'm not your blood, but I'm like the youngest of the middle, and yeah, I guess this guy just doesn't really love me,
Mm.
and it was all pent up rage and like pent up anger and resentment because my biological father never gave a shit about me,
Yeah, that's
and I was
understandable.
just too blind to see that my actual father loved me unconditionally.
Hmm. That had to be hard too, working at the same department together. Was that, I mean, other than you feel like you had to prove yourself until you guys had that moment or that breakthrough moment, that had to be tough, man, like working together.
It was the best. It was the best years of my career.
Really?
It was the hardest years of my career, but it was the best years of my career,
Mm.
man. I got to share being able to share the fire floor with my dad. Um, man, it's just like I'm trying not to get emotional when I think about it, dude, because it's just like there's nothing more fun than walking into some of the worst conditions that a human being goes into, right?
Mhm.
Because it's always I always laugh. You know, people civilians look at firemen and they're just like they look at us like they idolize us, right? They idolize the military, they idolize fire department, police officers and stuff like that. And I just always like joke around. I'm like, no, we're just idiots that are adrenaline junkies that just run into burning buildings.
Yeah.
Um, but just being able to share the fire floor with my dad, sharing a lot of complex operations with my dad, um, it was awesome. Like it's memories that, you know, God forbid whenever my dad passes away, like those are gonna be the memories that I hold so, so close to me because there's a percentage of the world that can't say they got to do cool shit like that with their
Yeah.
dad.
No, definitely. Yeah.
You know, my dad. But let me also say this: it's not like my dad's dying. He,
Right.
he's in phenomenal health for 55 years old. Works out every day. Him and my mom, and he's an absolute unit. But yeah, dude, it had its challenges, of course. Like it had any sort of challenge, you know, because my dad obviously he was an officer. He was a lieutenant at the time, and then ended up becoming a chief officer.
Mm.
So I served under him in both capacities.
Okay.
Um, and watching him progress in his career was an awesome thing to be able to stand right next to and see. But also, the like I said, the operational side of things
Mhm.
was just incredible. Was incredible moments.
Um, most, every man faces a battle, some are seen and unseen. What's the one, moment maybe that defined your journey the most throughout your life? Would it be your biological father stepping out, or is there something else that kinda stands out to you?
I've had a lot. I've had a lot of what I call rock bottom moments.
Mhm.
Um, the normal person usually only hits rock bottom once. I've hit rock bottom more than I can count. Um, but I would say honestly, man, like I can't really pinpoint one because, you know, I lost a finger. I stepped out of a I stepped out on a woman that I was with for 7 years. I had a terrible alcohol addiction. I was addicted to painkillers and pills. I wanted to, you know, if I had to say probably the biggest one that really just like made the shift and the turn for me, right, would probably be the time that I wanted to take my own life.
Okay. You wanna get into that?
Um, yeah. So I'll kind of like summarize everything to bring it up to this point. So the listeners can kind of get an understanding and don't think it was just some guy that just decided one day he was just going to kill himself because people don't do that, right? Um, so I'd hit like my 8th or 9th year on the job. Um, have had like I was with a girl at the time. Was with her for 7 years. Was engaged to get married to her. Was just massively unhappy with myself. Unhappy with the direction of the relationship because I just felt like I was um, having to do everything. Just felt like I was was having to be the backbone of everything, and never felt like I really had much support, because I think a lot of it, and I'm not gonna get too much into that because I'm not gonna just degrade people. But I felt alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we were on an operation on the interstate. We had just cleared an auto fire, and I was standing in the median of the interstate, and my fire truck was about 4 feet from me, and an 18-wheeler came across the hill. Driver of the 18-wheeler passed out or had a medical emergency, still unsure. To this day, I mean, this was quite a few years ago. Top of the hill, crested down, came down to about 80, 90 miles an hour, hit the back of the fire truck, and fire truck lifted up,
Jeez.
went like 180 degrees and shifted and came down. I mean, we were about 3.5, 4 feet from 4 of us being pink mist.
Wow.
And like all that happened, right?
Mhm.
And immediately right after that happened, 2 of us just clicked or flipped a switch and went right to try and cutting this guy out. And you know, to that point, I've had some really good fires where, I've been burnt up before, like some second degree burns and some heat burns, and nothing major, right? Pulled a guy out of a burning building. Inevitably he was dead. I probably should have left him where he was, because he was kind of far gone at that point. The lower half of his body was pretty much burnt off. But in the heat of the moment, I didn't really recognize that. I found a human life and I pulled him out. And then this incident happened.
Mhm.
And it really took a massive emotional toll on me, because everything of my life prior to that, the cheating, the alcoholism, I was still drinking heavily, which inevitably after this incident led me to drink even more.
I'm sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and I had some surgeries. I had, different stuff like that. So I had the access to painkillers and, nerve blockers, and I was taking Ambiens to sleep and this, that, and the other thing. And I just ensued all of that,
Mhm.
just ramped it up. Right. And, went through a really strong level of PTSD with that, dude. And in the time period, didn't want to believe it's PTSD, right?
Mhm.
Just kind of try to compartmentalize. I call myself a professional compartmentalization expert, because I just continuously compartmentalized everything.
Mhm.
Just told myself I wasn't going to be the one that boiled over. Sat down with therapists to just kind of talk, because some people were like, hey man, you just don't look good, like just go talk to somebody. And eventually, after fighting it so long, I was like, all right, yeah, I'm gonna go talk to somebody. Sat down, and the first thing that this therapist looked at me and said was like, have you ever heard of severe complex PTSD? Man, I came out the chair, like, just I went for this dude, and I was just cursing him out and just told him, I was like, you don't know what I've been through. You don't know. You haven't walked a day in my shoes, blah, blah, blah. Like, you're just some educated white coat that thinks he can diagnose people and just get away with crap like that. Right. Because I was in my brain, I'm like, this dude don't know what he's talking about. He hasn't pulled people out of burning buildings. He didn't almost get killed on the interstate. Like, he didn't have the guy grab him by his coat and beg for him not to die because he's bleeding out and he's heavily trapped inside of an 18-wheeler. He wasn't in the 100-degree heat cutting this 18-wheeler for almost 3 hours and 45 minutes in the dead of summer. Like, he wasn't a part of any of that, because I was too prideful, arrogant, and incomplacent to see that, like, what this guy was trying to do was this guy was trying to unveil the obvious
Mhm.
to then dive into the what I call the water boiling.
Okay.
Right, the water that boils, because how does water boil? Everybody thinks it's heat, it's pressure, right?
Mhm.
The same thing with your brain, the same thing with mental health. Inevitably, all that pressure comes onto you and you get to a point where you just snap.
Mhm.
So when water reaches its pressure threshold, it starts to boil. And that was the same thing that happened to me. I reached my pressure threshold, and I literally, dude, like, I'm pretty sure people would probably think like I was just like sick, dude. I was just very sick. I was drinking like a bottle and a half a night to go to sleep.
Mm.
I was taking 2 Ambiens. I was eating oxys like they were candy, dude. Whenever I lost my finger, they prescribed me gabapentin to kind of help with phantom pain. I never had any phantom pain. They were just like, you want this gabapentin for your phantom pain? And I was on all these pills, and I was like, sure, yeah, I'll take it. I was eating gabapentin. Dude, I was just I was in the lowest of the low. And I had been separated from that girl at the time for probably a year or so. And I was just in my apartment, and I hit a point where I was just like, I'm done. Like, my mental health couldn't be any lower. I had multiple like failed BS relationships that like I was just so stupid to think like these are the ones. Like, this is what's gonna make me better, is try and find a girl to stick with me.
Right.
And so womanizing and, like I said, still drinking, all of it, right? And finally I just hit my boiling point. So grabbed my pistol, loaded one in the chamber, put on the side of the bed. And this is what's crazy. Like, a lot of people, and I know you've interviewed a lot of veterans and myself too on my podcast, and I like talking about this because a lot of them, you don't realize how much we are protectors naturally, right? I put myself in a position when I wanted to blow my head off to make sure the bullet didn't go through the second floor, because I lived in an apartment, to hurt anybody else. So I positioned my body in the way that I wanted to take my life, was to protect others still, and put other people before me, and put other people's priorities and safety above mine, as I'm sitting on the side of the bed wanting to kill myself. And I literally, like, I stared at my gun and I said, I was always so critical about suicide. Like, I always used to say, like, that's the coward's way out. That's selfish, right? That's a selfish way to go, because how could you ever be low enough to where you want to take your own life? And here I am sitting there. And I remember my last words to myself were going to be, you're a coward. And that was it. And as I was really getting to the point of getting ready to go do it, dude, I felt like this rush of love come over me. And when you just talk about like dead space, that's what it was. Like, I could hear everything. My hearing had heightened, and I just felt like this voice in my head. I heard this voice in my head say, not yet. And dude, scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And that's the Holy Spirit,
Right.
right? That's the Holy Spirit saying no. And so I just like started crying. I dechambered my weapon and tossed it to the side. And I stood up and I started pacing in my apartment, in my bedroom. And I'm just like, dude, what in the world? And I just dropped to my knees and I started praying. And I said to the Lord, I said, I have been an unfaithful servant. I have been a terrible disciple. I've lived for the world. I've womenized. I've had the alcohol addiction. I've been addicted to pills. Like, I've done everything that somebody that wants to be Christ-like doesn't do. But all this time, I was lying to myself by saying, like, I believe there's a God, but I just don't know what my relationship's like with him. And I said right there in that moment, I said, okay, so I said, enough's enough. I said, this moment forward, I'm going to do all I can, the best I can, to profess your kingdom, to live for you. And I truly want to take myself out of the gutter. And I want to be an example of, like, when you feel like you're at the bottom, here's where you are. You can still come up. Like, there's never a point where you are so low to where you have to get to that point of wanting to kill yourself. And it was not an easy road, man. Like, I've ruined so many relationships because I was an alcoholic. I was an arrogant kid. I played with people's emotions, played with people's hearts. I didn't care about anybody but myself. And so here I am, somebody who was at the point of killing themselves. And what's the first phone call I get? It's from my mother. And she calls and she says, hey, how you doing? And what are you supposed to do? Tell her on the other phone? Oh, well,
Yeah.
I'm glad you called. I was getting ready to kill myself.
Right.
And so no, like, dude, it took me, I just told my mother probably 3 weeks ago that story.
Wow.
3 weeks ago, I finally told my mother that story. I've talked about it 2 times on my podcast with 2 different guests, and I finally, like, told her the whole thing, and, you know, it's very releasing and I love talking about it because, like, I finally found myself being a massive advocate for mental health because, for my generation of guys that came up, like, I think I've had a very successful career. Um, but a lot of people, I came up in the generation, and me and you talked about this off camera. I came up in the generation where it was don't be soft, don't be
Mhm.
weak.
Yeah.
It was just be tough and keep going. And it's taken a lot for me to get to the point where I realized it's okay to talk about not being okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask you real quick, man. So let me back up a little bit. When you were at that point and you felt the Holy Spirit tell you, not yet, was that the moment that God kind of became real to you? You think? Is that where you would say that was kind of your faith point, pivot where you're like, okay, now I understand, God has a purpose for my life. And I know you mentioned kind of, you weren't living as a disciple and we've all kind of, I think, been to that point in our lives, but was that kind of your moment of like, okay, I need to put God first in everything I do from that moment?
100%.
Okay.
I've thought about this before, and I said, when I've been in some hairy situation on fires or something like that, I've always said, Lord, I hope you get me out of here alive. Right. But I
Yeah.
never really felt the power of God because we train our tails off just like Delta Special Forces SEAL teams and all that. Like SEAL Team 6 and Delta, they're so good. And what separates SEAL Team 6 from SEAL Team 8 is those dudes are the highest pinnacle that you can go to. Like SEAL Team 6 is the highest pinnacle. Delta Force is the highest pinnacle that you can go to, right? That's how I always carry myself. And to this day, that's how I carry myself on the job is I carry myself to that tier 1 operator level, right? Because we operate on a deployment technically 365 days a year as firemen, right? Obviously, we don't work every single day of our life, but it's a constant deployment. And so I train nonstop and became a student of my craft. And so I always relayed in my brain that if I found myself in a hairy situation, I was going to default to my training. I was too arrogant to realize that the reason I got out of these sticky situations is because the Lord was there to protect me.
Hmm.
So when I was getting ready to take my own life, yes, 100% the answer to your question is yes. That was like the first moment since childhood that I felt the Lord standing right in front of me with his arms open and said like, it's okay to come back. I never left you.
Hmm. Well, let me ask you this. So you mentioned, you were using medications, prescription drugs, you were drinking a lot of alcohol. Um, how did you what did you start recovery or how did you go through those steps? And I'm going to say this real quick. I've been sober for 4 years from alcohol. I struggle with the term alcoholic because of how it's kind of painted with a broad stroke. I don't agree with the textbook definition of an alcoholic because I don't think it applies to everybody. But I'm curious, like, what steps did you take to get help or to get in recovery? Can you kind of cover some of that?
Yeah. So I actually just hit 7, 8, or 9, 8 months sober. I
Okay,
just hit 8 months
nice, nice.
completely sober.
From alcohol?
So from
Okay.
alcohol, I've been that day, I flushed all my painkillers and pills down the toilet. The day that I wanted to take my life, I threw everything down the toilet. But this is where I definitely try to remain as raw and real as possible. What couldn't I kick was the alcohol, right? Because so I
Mhm,
took myself from drinking, myself to $100 bar tabs a night, and plus, two, I said, okay, I'm only gonna have like 3, 4 beers, this, that, and the other thing to still help myself sleep. And dude, it took me. I've known my wife for 3 years. We've been married almost a year. We've been together for 2 years, married almost a year. So, um, when did I really like fully kick it? My alcohol addiction,
mhm,
was when she was in the picture
okay.
because my wife said one of the most powerful powerful things to me. She said, when you get drunk and you get mean, she said, you don't want to be mean. She said, you are running from a lot of pain.
Mm.
And right there was the moment when you're staring at the love of your life right there in front of you. And she says that, right? And she comes from a family that doesn't drink. My parents have never had a problem with alcohol, but they do, socially drink.
Mm-hmm.
And right there, I was like, you know what? I'm quitting. So in the roundabout way of answering your question, I'm sorry if I answer them in long-winded ways. I just everything cold turkey.
Okay.
Like I talked to some therapists and some shrinks and stuff like that. I know me and you like off camera were talking about, I got diagnosed with a TBI and different stuff like that. I've had like 4 major concussions and all that. And so when I sat down with this doctor and I was talking about like all these symptoms that I was having leading into this TBI and told her about how bad my alcoholism was, she was like, "Do you see the correlation?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Wow, that, you know, because I agree with you. The term alcoholic is a really broad stroke term that they put on things.
Yeah.
I wasn't, for me, as somebody who's blunt and real with myself and brash with myself, I call myself an alcoholic, but I was just somebody who used alcohol as a supplement to numb pain.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of us do, man. It's easier that way.
It's easy because nobody, think about how much they charge you to go sit in front of a therapist and talk to a therapist.
I don't even look at
So-
it that way, man. It's just mental health is hard, man. Drinking is easy.
Well,
and it's fun.
it is.
And it's fun.
It is. And the example I want to use is like, the example I'm going to use is like, a therapist charges you $80 an hour to talk to him, right? Well, I can drink way more alcohol for $80 and not have to talk about my problems. And so then you find ways to tie it into being fun. And then you say, well, I found a group of people that love to drink alcohol and love to
Mhm.
party and go out and have fun. So now I'm just going to go do that.
Yeah.
And so then, you find yourself just finding an easy route to numb and dilute your pain because why? It's cheaper.
Well-
It's fun. It's more attractive.
Let's break it down this way too. I mean, you really have to face your demons head on. Or take the money part out of it, because I know in Tennessee, first responders receive therapy for free. I don't know about where you are, but so I'm talking about you have to face those demons, that trauma from childhood, or that call you were on that haunts you, or not feeling worthy because you didn't maybe get to a point in your life where you wanted to be, or you can't get over a past relationship. I think as men that are competitive and that want to prove themselves and do jobs where they put themselves in harm's way, sometimes it's more scary to face some shit inside of you than it is to just say, hey, I'm just gonna go get drunk because I don't have to think about it. Like you mentioned at the beginning of this, compartmentalizing that piece. If I get drunk, that childhood trauma goes in a box over here. It's still going to come out, and probably 9 times out of 10 in a negative way, but you're not sitting down face to face. Like when you mentioned talking with the therapist and you got, you felt attacked almost when they mentioned PTSD. That stuff is hard, man. And I think to change the narrative of what it means to be a real man or masculinity, you have to have the courage to face that. And I'm glad to hear that you have your wife that can be that, that strong foundation for you and support. But I think, for men that are listening to this, they need to understand you're going to have to face them. I mean, whether you like it or not, because if you don't, I'm a product of this. It will take away everything you hold dear to your heart. If you do not deal with your shit and have the courage to face it head on. So I just kind of wanted to put that piece in there, man. I get what you mean about the cost of it, but for a first responder, like I said, in my state, I don't know about your state, but those services are free. I mean, I went through them.
Yeah.
So
let me hit on that for a second too, is, I had to develop systems. Like I had to develop dials and switches is what I call it. I kind of coined that term a little bit from DJ Shipley because I love how he explains it. But inevitably I did the same thing, man. Like I had to find myself on a routine. I
Yeah.
had to find myself on a way of like, all the way down to how I ate. How I eat translates to how I'm going to feel, because if I eat like crap, I'm going to inevitably just feel bloated. I'm going to feel exhausted. I'm going to feel tired. So then what happens? I lay around and the depression starts to creep in, and then the head starts free flowing and this, that, and the other thing. Right. So if I don't eat strict, if I don't stay on a strict workout regimen, if I don't stay, wake up and sleep at the same time, and my sauna exposure and stuff like that, man, like on top of the medications that I take, for um for like testosterone and my TBI supplements and stuff like that, all that stuff, if I don't keep that routine going, then I'm going to fall back into the gutter. So on top of talking about it and facing it, I think one of the biggest thing is that I always talk about with men is like, okay, so you've addressed the problem and you face the problem now. So now you have to figure out a platform and a method to fix the problem. Okay, we're never going to erase the trauma. We're never going to erase what happened.
Mm-hmm.
You have to learn how to come up with systems to manage that. Because I'm having a horrible day and I'm having all these depression symptoms and times that come into my brain, because guess what? I'm never 100% healed. I'm still going to have days where I'm low on a mental health day, right? Well, it's not my problem, is what I used to think. Is it's not my problem if I just snap on somebody. Okay. Once I identified and got my shit together, basically, and if me and my wife get in an argument, like, because that's what married people do, I have to sit back and I have to take myself and say, like, dude, there's times where you have to be assertive about something. And then there's times where you have to sit back and say, it's not that big of a thing. And how you navigate communication and how you navigate simple problems and different stuff like that, like, it's extremely important, because inevitably people that carry a lot of trauma that don't address it deflect it as other people's issues.
Yeah.
And I was one of those people, excuse me, that deflected it to other people's issues. Like if a relationship didn't work out, it wasn't my problem. It's just she didn't care to hear about my baggage. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then, I told my wife, like, once I got to a very healthy place, I'm at a healthy place in life now and have been for a couple of years. And I'm very thankful and blessed for that. But I told my wife, I'm like, look, it's not your responsibility to be my trauma bag. I'm like, it's your responsibility as my wife, me as your husband, to lead you and guide you. And then also you as the wife to nurture. So like when I come to you and say, hey, I'm having a hard day, and she's there for me if I want to talk. If not, she's not my person. She's not the responsible one to sit there and take all the bluntness of it. It's my responsibility to say I have these systems in place to keep myself at a consistent level and not spike up to here and just discard all that emotion and all that anger and all that trauma on all these people around me, because that's what you used to do. And that's why it left you empty and relationshipless and friendless. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's dude, you're 100% right. Like, and we get opportunity and openness, through like employee EAP programs.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to give a quick shout out to somebody on your podcast. He's a really good friend of mine, Steven Sampolo. I went to high school with this guy. Him and his father are running a massive program. It's called Peer Connect.
Mm.
And they're trying to work in conjunction with states all across the country to provide first responders with free mental health.
Nice.
And what they're doing is incredible, man. Like, he's just a phenomenal guy. And there's a lot more people. I think, and what you're doing, dude, what you're doing is phenomenal, brother. Like,
Thank you.
you are highlighting what people don't want to talk about. And we live in a society and a generation where it needs to be talked about more, because the days of be tough, be strong, just forget about your problems. It just got to get over with.
Yeah.
You can be a strong man and you can be a good man, but you can also be a man that's emotionally intelligent.
I don't think you can be strong without that emotional intelligence, man.
I agree.
I really don't. And I know, like, I'm a little bit older than you, and I'm probably newer to the age of like YouTube and social media than maybe some of the younger guys out there, but like there's a lot of content that really glorifies units and operations and mindset coaching. And I think what I want people to take away from this episode is, Justin, as the man, what you've endured, and overall your career is important, but at the end of the day, what's your true identity? What
Yeah.
what are you doing with your life? And there's nothing wrong with watching motivational content or saying, hey, these guys are doing this job that's badass, and I respect that. But what I want people to take away is, don't make false idols out of career paths. Or I did all this, so I'm talking to myself. You mentioned 2 units that are very sexy. There's movies, there's major players out in social media making millions of dollars because they got through some of the toughest selection schools in the United States military and in the world. I respect those jobs. But man, what I want you to hear from this is, don't make an idol out of somebody because of what they do for a living. Put Jesus in your
Yeah.
life, find your purpose through Christ, and then you can make your own path. I'm going to say it one more time. I'm not disrespecting those units, but I think they get a little too much glory when the glory needs to go to this man right here. That's how I
I
see
agree.
it.
And dude, we're the same, like we're the same way, bro. Like there's the veteran jargon that you see in in today's society, right?
Yeah.
It's no different. It's no different in the fire service.
Oh, I know.
Firemen eat
I know.
a fireman eat fireman, and I was just as much guilty of it, right? Every single human being is guilty of it, and it's taken the person that stands up and says, "Dude, let's just stop being like that." For a very, very long time in my career, what did I identify myself as? Being the best fireman I could possibly be, being the best operational guy that I could be for the citizens that I serve. And I didn't give a crap about what my personal well being was like. I didn't give a crap about the relationships. If you didn't want to be friends with me because you thought I was an asshole, okay, well, at the end of the day, I knew I was a good fireman. So that's what I cared about. And when it made the shift, when I got married and I got realigned with God and Christ, and I'm now a soon father to be, that's my identity.
Mhm.
My identity is as a disciple of Christ, first and foremost, a husband, which inevitably creates me to have to be a leader, right? We talk about leadership. The military is filled with leadership. The fire department is filled with leadership. Well, if you're not established in Christ, then you're not going to be able to be a good leader. If
Yep.
you're going to be a husband and you don't understand what leadership is because you don't have a foundation in Christ, then you can't be a good husband. And then now you bring the father aspect into it.
Mhm.
If you think you're going to be some great father, but you have none of the other two, you're a terrible husband and you're a horrible Christ follower, but you think you're going to be a phenomenal father. I'm sorry, you're just not going to convince me that that's a possibility, because you've consumed, like you just said, Steve, you've consumed your identity into one thing. And really, at the end of the day, I say this, and I know this probably is going to offend some people's feelings, and I'm sorry if it does, but I don't care at the end of the day. When you hang your coat up in the firehouse for the last time, guess what? 3 days to a week later, someone else is gonna be in that locker. When
Mhm.
you hang your kid up in the team room for the last time, guess what? There's another young, hungry kid that's getting ready to finish selection and come in there and take that locker over.
Mhm.
So stop thinking that's your identity, because it's not. Your identity is Christ, family, and fatherhood is what I believe that, as a men, our primal desire as men, that's what we should be going after, is Christ, family, and fatherhood.
Yeah, I want to say this real quick, just for the single dads out there. That's me too. I totally hear what you're saying. I think you can still be a good dad if you are not a good husband and you're not putting Christ
100%.
first. But to be the best father your kids deserve, you have to have Christ as your center. And I say that because even at my lowest, when I was a piece of shit and was a bad husband, I still was a good dad. I wasn't the best dad my kids deserve. And the reason I say this, Justin, I'm not picking on you. Sean Ryan put a thing out that really bothered me a couple months ago. And he said, I don't know if it was him himself or his media team, but it said, you only have one shot at being a good dad. And if you blow it, that's all you get. And I just disagree with that 100%. I think there's a lot of men out there that may not have their own crap together. I interviewed a guy a couple days ago, same name, Justin. He was in prison for 8 years. And as soon as he got out, he was a single dad and he worked 3 jobs to provide for his kids. And I think I just don't want to give men that false, that are struggling, that are single. Cause man, I mean, we're not getting into it on this episode, but being a single parent and being divorced as a man, you talk about being on an island in this world, dude. There's not a whole
Mhm.
lot of support for those men, and it is a daily battle mentally, especially to stay the course and be present for your kids. So I agree with what you're saying. You got to put Christ first and to be that good dad or be that best version of a father. But I just want to add my 2 cents in because it's a different perspective when you throw those things away, when you throw away a
You
family.
have a you have a perspective that I'll never know, and I hope to God I never know that, right?
I hope you
Because
don't either,
I'm
man.
I'm
I hope you
sure
don't
if
either.
you had to go back and do it all over again, you wouldn't want to have to be a single father. And but I like I said, I'm going to give you credit, man, because your action, your daily implement, for the listeners, me and Steve talk a lot outside of this podcast, and I associate you as a brother because of I can recognize what you are. And I want to tell you something, man. Like when I found out I was going to be a father, I had a very happy release moment with my wife, right? But
Hmm.
you know what creeped into my head, and
Hmm.
I dealt with this for quite a few weeks. I thought about my biological father,
Yeah, I bet.
and
I bet.
I sat back and I said, man, like I wonder I wonder what he would think now if I looked at him and said, "Hey, I'm going to be a father."
Hmm.
But two, I wonder what he would say to me. Like I wondered, do you think he'd look back and say like, "Man, I was never there and I'm sorry, but like I was always in the background. Like I heard about the things that you did."
Hmm.
And I, the one of the things I told myself is, I wonder if he would have said, "I'm proud of you."
Hmm.
But when my father, my main father, said and showed the reaction that he showed, and he dealt with time as a single father himself, and I watched how he loved my two older brothers, and then took me and my mom in, and the way he loved me throughout my life. You know, I will say this, and I hope I didn't offend you by any stretch of
No,
the
no,
sense,
no. You
but
didn't offend me at all. I just wanted to give a different perspective on it. But
right, and but I'll say this is married or not, you can still love a child unconditionally because it comes down to who you are as your internal being,
yeah,
you
totally.
know? And so I give you a lot of credit, man.
Well, I just want to kind of like give the single dads a voice, and that was my one of my main motivators to even do a podcast because there's not a lot of resources out there for single dads. But I'm going to tell you this, man. I'm proud of you for being self aware enough to embrace that role as a husband, especially as a father, because your life will completely change when you really have to, embrace that fatherhood role. And I don't think we as men do a best job of kind of educating younger guys in like high school or college, like, hey, this is what it really means to be a real man. And these are your responsibilities, whether you like it or not. If you make that decision to have kids, guess what? You need to own it and be that dad that they deserve. And I think it's cool how self-aware you are, man. Cause I know there is an age difference between us. And I admire that because I wish I would have got my shit together when I was younger. And I'm not regretting it because I wouldn't be where I'm at today without it. But it definitely would have impacted my children in a different way, in a positive way, if I would have got my shit together when I was younger.
100%. And I think another thing too is we talk about mental health a lot because that's pretty much what your platform's built on is mental health, right?
Hmm.
I told myself the other day I was in the gym and I was just doing a really tough workout, man. Like I got a awesome guy with a rogue firemanship training. If you don't mind me, I'm going to plug him real quick.
No,
My
go for it.
really good buddy Logan Broberg runs Rogue Firemanship Training. He put some really nasty, spicy workouts together for me, some fire department oriented workouts, right, to make us better. But I love having these. I think a lot about things. I reflect a lot when I'm working out. And I said to myself, getting ready to come into the week of this podcast and just kind of putting my thoughts together, like, how do I want to navigate this? I said, it's more important now than ever to be grounded with how I take care of my mental health because guess what? You don't want your kids to see you flying off the handle. You don't want your kids don't want to see you beating a bottle down, beating a pill bottle down, stuff like that. Like, especially now because you have to be present more than ever. Like you just said, your life's getting ready to change. And I have no idea how my life's getting ready to change.
No,
And,
you don't.
and, and and I'm still on the job. Like I still have some years left, and that means there's still going to be traumatic incidents. There's still going to be crappy things that happen, right? I could very much walk into work tomorrow and something happen. But more than ever now, you have to be so consciously aware because you're showing up for more than just yourself and one other person. You're showing up for two other people that depend on you a lot.
Well, those kids are always watching too, man. They may not say anything,
Mhm.
but they're always watching.
Always
So,
watching, man.
yeah.
And I've got some awesome people that are fathers that mentor me, and just I'm really thankful to have them, and especially you, man. Like you're always going to be somebody I have in my corner, and I just appreciate everything that you do, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
appreciate you. I say looking up to me in the way that you look up to me, and I'm thankful I get to look up to you in the way I look up to you.
Well, it's the greatest blessing, man, to be a dad. And it's hard to put it into words, man. Are you having a little boy or a little girl?
I got a girl,
Okay.
man, so my hands are really full.
Well, I've got a 15-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. So yeah, especially at those young ages, little girls, man, even with my daughter when she was really young, we were super tight. And it's a blessing, man. And I'm glad to hear that you're taking it on, full steam ahead, and you're looking forward to it. Cause especially as a guy in a first responder role, it's easy. And I can say this because I was a police officer. It's easy to kind of put that career above family. And it sounds like you're really stepping into that role and looking forward to it. And that's really good to hear, especially in a world that we live in right now.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's an everyday struggle, man. It's an everyday thing. But I'm very thankful, especially as my daughter will get older. I'm thankful for companies like Beretta, Sig, and Glock as she starts, because
You,
you got a
s-
15-year-old, so you're
yeah,
getting ready
you
to
say that now, dude. You say that now.
you're getting ready to get into that
Oh,
really tough
I've
time,
been in
man.
that world, man. You just wait. You got no
Phew,
idea. These kids, they start out way younger than you can imagine, man.
man.
It is wild. Well, let me ask you this, man. I want to kind of shift gears a little bit. Tell us about your podcast. And you mentioned, let me make sure I got this right. You've been sober for 8 months, right? From alcohol.
Yeah, like 8 or 9 months. Yeah, from
Okay.
alcohol for overall about for pills and anything like that over 2 years.
Okay. Nice. Well, congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment, man. I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you.
What inspired you to start a podcast, and kind of tell our listeners what your platform is with your show, and what your goal is with it?
So yeah, well, I started this podcast in my parents' guest bedroom on vacation one year, 3 years ago.
Okay.
Um, I was I was actually training for a marathon, and I just was in a really, really good spot, and I had a lot of guys that were, I was putting out some motivational stuff like here and there. And I had some people hitting me up, and I was actually working with a couple guys, not only, I guess you could say life coach wise, but also physical fitness wise.
Hmm.
And I just was like, what do I want to do? Like, do I want to write a book? I'm like, well, I'm 27 years old. What am I going to write a book about? My 10 years or my 8, 9 years of my career at that point, 10 years. Nah, nothing impressive. Not to minimize my successes, but like I was like, I don't really have something crazy to write a book about. So what was the next thing I could think of? I was like, what about a podcast?
Hmm.
And so the platform for the listeners, I run, like Steve said at the beginning, I run the Carter Mentality podcast on Spotify. Um, I oriented around a self-help podcast. I took a lot of like what Joe Rogan does and what Sean Ryan does and like blended the two together of like the conversational type stuff, right?
Hmm.
Life stories, career highlight, and just in like pretty much just then at that point after I get the life stories and career highlights, I love to go down rabbit holes. I'm a big rabbit hole guy. So I pretty much just started this podcast around like highlighting because one, I love to talk to people. If the listeners by now can't figure out I love to talk, sorry. I guess you couldn't figure it out. Um, but I just love meeting people because everybody's got a story, bro.
Uh-huh.
Everybody has a story. And you know what? I tell you this is like a lot of things in life humbled me, but this podcast humbled me more because I thought I had some shitty moments in life. Dude, I've interviewed some people where my problems looked like a McDonald's value meal. And I was like, okay, obviously I'm not that effed up, you know? And again, not to minimize myself, but like, dude, I just, this, some of the things that I interview people and learn about, I'm just like, holy crap. Like there's a lot of guys that walk this earth still that 110% by the grace of God that they're still walking this earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, man, I've just really designed and oriented my podcast towards highlighting the stories and successes of people and the abilities to create a self-help platform of motivation, inspiration, and leadership through storytelling and ultimately to advance the kingdom of God. Because I didn't do well because again, I dealt with some self-identity problem. I didn't want to be that weird guy that only just went on my podcast and talked about God, 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 right? Because I was like, well, how many people are really going to listen? And then I was like, well, I don't want to be another fire department podcast because how much are you going to talk about stretching lines, throwing ladders, and this, that, and the third, right? People are eventually going to be checked out. So I said, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to interview some firemen. And then, yeah, obviously it'll be known that I'm a fireman because that's what my job is. But I want to highlight stories. Like I want to highlight people's lives because what you, as Steve, have pulled yourself out of the gutter and done, there's probably some dude that's listening on the other end of that podcast, driving his car to Alabama in the middle of nowhere, right? That decides to hop on for a 2-hour podcast. Excuse me. And next thing you know, he's on the side of the road and he's praying because he's like, God, this has touched my life. Like this is something that I've always struggled with. And if this guy can do it, I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And, 3 years in, I'm very fortunate to say that I've gained a lot of traction, man. And I'm really blessed because God's put me in a position to be able to interview some awesome people and gained a lot of traction. Um, but all of it's to the glory of him. And all of it is because he's given me that ability to be able to share my testimony and relate to other people that have allowed them an opportunity to come in and share their testimony.
Has your perspective kind of shifted since you've been sober from alcohol? So you've been doing the podcast for 3 years. Has that kind of changed the framework at all now that you're sober from alcohol?
Massively,
Okay.
massively. Being able to emotionally relate to people on a very deeper level. When I first started this podcast, I obviously wasn't 100% ready to kick alcohol. I had cut back a dramatic amount though. I
Mm-hmm.
was only having like, 4 or 5 beers a week at that point when I started the podcast. And then, but still, I kind of felt like some of these episodes that I was talking about when I was talking about like mental, health and just grit and leadership, I felt like an imposter because I
Mm.
was like, well, I'm not really 100% sober. I'm not 100% on the track of, being able to really highlight that. Once I got fully clean and once I fully got sober, man, that imposter feeling kind of went away. There's still times where I feel like an imposter because I interview some of the most amazing people in the world that I'm just like, what do I have that you do?
Right.
Um, but ever since I got sober, man, it's just like it's so much easier to relate to people.
Nice. Nice. That's good to hear, man. If there's a man that's listening right now, Justin, that's on the edge of giving up, what would you say to that man?
Don't, don't, because at the end of the day, the battle's not worth giving up the fight. Um, we as men are so prone to putting everything on our shoulders, to putting everything on our backs, to have to feel like we have to fix everything and protect everything. And I'm going to use a fire department reference here. Your span of control. Okay. Um, know your span of control. Be okay with saying no. I took so much clarity when I stopped drinking, man. I lost a lot of friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lost a lot of friends. You know what? I don't care.
Yeah.
You know why? Because those identities were surrounded around one thing, and that was alcohol.
Yeah.
Um, saying no has brought me friends that I wouldn't dare to give up. Friends that I'd be willing to take bullets for, and it's okay to say no. It's okay to say, I need help. But most importantly, it's okay to understand that you don't have to be the one to control it all. When you pray a prayer of releasement and sacrificing of feelings and the release of anxiety and all that stuff, it's one of the most freeing prayers. Um, Also to say if you're feeling like giving up, do go do something hard. Do hard things and then figure out if it's really worth giving up. Because when you do hard things, it clears your mind and it puts you in a level of grounding and orientation, and you're able to make a lot more conscious decisions than it is when you're just trying to make a decision immersed and emulsified in anxiety, stress, and pain.
How do you feel about praying us out, man?
Yeah, you mind if I lead it?
No, I want you to. Yeah, I want you to.
Okay. Heavenly Father, man, we thank you so much. We thank you that you have strapped and equipped two men, myself and especially Steve. But I want to highlight Steve with the heart of Judah. Lord, you know you have him on the forefront of leading guys to try and be better and to realize that it's okay to be a strong man and a good man and releasement of that toxic masculinity, and letting men realize that there's a safe space for them to find the help that they need and find the ability to find themselves in the midst of nothing but chaos. Lord, I thank you for the opportunity that you gave me and the words that you blessed me to be able to come on his podcast to hopefully reach out and touch the lives of his listeners. Lord, you've worked massively through me and have allowed me to pull myself from that gutter to be able to be a testimonial image for it's okay. And so, Lord, for that, I just thank you. Lord, I thank you for the time that you've allowed me to share with Steve and his listeners on the Peace, Power, and Purpose podcast. Lord, I ask that you just place your hands across this podcast, blast this platform to the top and this podcast to the top, and give Steve the ability to continue to interview amazing people. Lord, I'm just a fish in the sea of your amazing kingdom. I'm just thankful that you've placed people in my life like Steve that have allowed me to give the opportunity to speak about things to affect the lives of others. But ultimately, Lord, all of this is possible because we have that love and that establishment in you. Heavenly Father, as we move forward throughout this time and throughout the week, Lord, I thank you for the blessings and the love that you place on us daily. I thank you for your coat of armor to be able to navigate situations that sometimes might feel like they're hard, but really aren't on the grand scheme of everything. So, Lord, as we close this out, Lord, we just want to say one, that we love you, and two, I ask that you equipped all of his listeners with the armor and the heart of Judah. The armor of God and the heart of Judah, Lord, is because it's okay to be dangerous, but it's great to be good. Lord, so I thank you for that. And I ask this all in your heavenly name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for tuning in to the Peace, Power, and Purpose podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss an episode. And also go check out the Carter Mentality podcast and support Justin on his platform. Man, I appreciate you coming on today, dude. It was good to talk to you and kind of get to know you better. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you're doing in the future and how you're inspiring men to take control of their mental health and also to take Jesus as their Lord and Savior.
Absolutely, brother. Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a true honor.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you.
All righty.